What's up? My name is Samone Blue,
Hi, and I'm Moody Gem.
and this is Melanated Theory. So today we're going to be going over When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. So Alyssa Cole is a New York Times bestselling author. Her genres include romance, historical, contemporary, and science fiction. She also writes thrillers like the one we're going to be going over today. She was born August 12th of 1982, which makes her a Leo, and she splits her time between New York City and Martinique.
All right, so the book was published last year around September 1st to be exact. This genre is a bit new for Alyssa. She is best known for romance, so thriller is kind of a new genre for her. She has also done mystery, and this book was nominated for a Goodreads Choice Award for Best Mystery and Thriller. What others are saying. So Alyssa Raymond from Copper Dog Books is saying, Cole's thriller exposes the underbelly of gentrification and prosperity, taking a searing look at systemic racism. When a pharmaceutical firm plans to move its headquarters to a historically Black Brooklyn neighborhood, an influx of white rich people displace Black residents from their homes and their roots. Timely, groundbreaking, and thought-provoking, When No One Is Watching is the central reading for the Black Lives Matter movement.
All right, so before we jump too much into the novel, we're going to go over some things that we liked and some things that we didn't like so much. So we're going to start with the positive. Some things that I really enjoyed about this novel were how modern it felt. For instance, there's a joke early on in the novel where she talks about the white folk that have moved into her neighborhood and how they have brought an infestation of bed bugs. And it's because they don't wash their legs. Now, if you were active on Twitter, 2019, early 2020, then you know that was a huge joke. I hope you're all washing your legs. Please. I really also enjoyed the imagery in the novel, how much detail she put into describing things. It really keeps you interested.
For sure. I agree with that. For me, I know that Alyssa Cole, I've seen some of her novels and most of them are romance. And I really liked the fact that the main character was not so concerned with falling in love and like doing a traditional approach to a romance type novel. Instead, what we get is the greatest love between the main character is between herself and her mother. And so I really liked that it was like out of the box. It wasn't so conventional. So I very much enjoyed that. Now, as far as our dislikes, I would say that there was a couple of issues with being reliable, right? The narrators are definitely ones that are not as reliable as they could be in terms of giving us the full story. I mean, there's many times where we have to question even the sanity of the main character, right?
Yeah, definitely. She talks a lot about how her ex-husband tried to have her committed. And as the novel goes on, you just start to question, well, maybe he should have. It's just certain things like burying your mother in the community garden that kind of undermine your mental stability a bit.
Yeah, I wasn't going for it. I mean, honestly, I thought, okay, maybe she's going through a lot. She's really stressed. Her neighbors are disappearing out of nowhere. The neighborhood is rapidly changing. Perhaps this is kind of just a part of her struggle to keep up with everything. And then we get thrown for a loop with that little tidbit. So I definitely agree. But she's not the only one. I mean, there's also Theo, a little problematic fave, if you will. And he's not reliable either. Half the story is taking place either in her point of view or his, or if we can really trust Theo. I mean, we don't even know 100% who he is until around, I would say, over half of the novel, where we finally get this, oh, hey, yeah, and, I'm a part of the Russian mob. So once you learn that and you
steal
see
from all my neighbors.
And I steal from him, exactly. And you see that he has actually been a part of the robberies that are, taking place and nobody knows who's doing it. Yeah, it's a bit unreliable. So
I'm glad you brought up Theo because he's actually my biggest issue with the novel. And it's not Theo himself. It's the white savior trope that ends up happening. So throughout the entire novel, Theo is an entire mess. And then he ends up saving the day. He comes to Sydney's rescue. He helps her figure out what's happened to the neighbors. And without him, Sydney really would have been lost. So yeah, I really wish she would have been the champion of her own narrative, but instead we get Theo.
And honestly, I'm not one to I don't like bagging on people, but he, you know, you kind of have a contrast between him and his girlfriend, Kim, who is her own issue. I mean, Kim really should have just been named Karen at this point. I mean, she does all the same things as a Karen, right? I mean, from the point that she came into the neighborhood saying, oh, it just doesn't feel safe. Meanwhile, you're the one coming here. You're the one wanting to be in this neighborhood and constantly attacking Sydney and attacking just parts of the neighborhood that are essential parts of it and trying to change things, right? I mean, how could you fall in love with someone like that, live with someone like that, buy a home with somebody like that? Yeah, Theo is a bit questionable. Talk a little bit about the plot. So it starts off with a tour of Gifford Place.
Yes. So at the beginning of the novel, we have Sydney going on a tour of her neighborhood that a tour guide, who happens to be Caucasian, is giving. And everywhere that she stops, she kind of mentions some white history of the neighborhood. So Sydney kind of calls her to the floor and is like, well, you know, this neighborhood is primarily Black. Yeah. And you're not mentioning any of the history that has to do with Black people. So Sydney becomes inspired to come up with her own tour so that she can highlight the history of her neighborhood from the perspective of people of color.
And while she's doing that and getting, you know, a little bit more close to Theo, we also simultaneously see other neighbors who she was close to suddenly going missing. It's a bit strange. I mean, it starts with an older lady who just next door neighbor, never heard a fly. And all of a sudden she just up and sold her house. No, doesn't make sense. Several neighbors are doing the same. And, you know, this becomes a major point of contention throughout the piece because we're wondering, well, why are these neighbors leaving if they are so invested in the community, in the neighborhood?
So throughout the novel, well, for the first half of the novel, you're under the impression that Sydney's mother is sick, that she's in a home somewhere and Sydney keeps trying to call her, but keeps missing her or something like that. However, you learn about halfway through that Sydney's mother is actually passed away and that in order to save their house, Sydney buried her in the community garden.
And honestly, logistically, we don't even know how close the garden is to the house. We don't know if it's next door. We don't know if it's down the block. We just know it's in the neighborhood. And so I can't imagine her in the middle of the night dragging, you know what? I ain't going there. But anyway, so she somehow miraculously on her own.
No, she had help though.
Drea yes, she did. Right, her best friend. Her best friend in the middle of the night, they carry the mother to the community garden and plant her under, I believe it was sunflowers?
Yes.
Missing neighbors, dead woman in the community garden. It keeps getting stranger and stranger. And all of a sudden, this ride or die best friend who's carrying, you know, her best friend's deceased mother to the community garden is now all of a sudden actually a person of interest in terms of betraying our main character.
When she went to the apartment and discovered the money from the company that was responsible for tricking her mother into the process that they were going to lose their house to, it was kind of shocking because she relied so heavily on Drea for so much, like emotional support. Right. And absolutely. So that was shocking. And it was a little upsetting that we never got to see Drea redeemed. Like that was our last impression of her. Yeah. Because we end up finding out that Drea died.
Right. So once again, not in a very traditional way, but we'll get to that in a moment. The only thing that is kind of traditional is kind of the relationship between Theo and Sydney. I mean, they see each other, they think each other's kind of attractive. They both see that they're in a kind of, you know, meh situation and place in life. Theo is desperately trying to find roots and home in this neighborhood, and Sydney seems the closest thing to him that isn't bristling every time a white person approaches necessarily, or at least him. So we get this relationship where they're forming at first, a tolerance, and then an alliance, and then some weird kind of romantic thing, right? But it doesn't take center stage to the rest of the plot.
Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about her relationship with Theo, though, is you said it was kind of weird romantic, but I think that has to do with the fact that Sydney is uncomfortable with his whiteness. And in some ways, he's uncomfortable with her blackness. Like, we have that moment where she tells him, like, when you do something dangerously white, I'm gonna say howdy doody to like let you know. So they're both uncomfortable
they
with each
have
other's
safe
like,
words.
yeah, they're
And
other
not
than
in the bedroom. Like, yeah, definitely a bit uncomfortable, right? For sure.
Yeah, so they can't really be intimate in that way because they're uncomfortable with each other's otherness, if you will.
Yeah.
The other issue is Theo is not racist in the traditional sense. However, he's very complicit. He's very complicit. There's the scene in the bodega where his girlfriend,
Kim.
Yes.
We might as well just call her Karen at this point. It totally fits more than Kim. But yeah, her name was Kim. Not relevant.
Cuts Sydney in line, and Sydney calls her out on it. Like, you don't see me standing here. And she has on bright colors, clearly can see her. And so they're having an altercation. And of course, Kim pulls the white woman card, starts being dramatic. I don't know why she's attacking me. And Theo steps in to try to de-escalate the situation. But what's interesting about it is he doesn't call Kim out at all for her behavior. He wants to comfort her. He wants to be the protector. And he even tries to use it as an opportunity to get close to her again. So.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of sickening when you're in his mind when this scene is happening, because you're hoping, given his track record, that he's a little bit more aware about what's going on, but he seems just as oblivious as her. And in a way, it's almost even more harmful because, thinking of Sydney in that moment, I think like, okay, this is the guy that you're basically allowing in your home and around you, and he wants to learn about the neighborhood and the Black people in the neighborhood and the history. And he goes and pulls something like this. He's thinking about protecting his white girlfriend, who's the one who started the issue. And it's not really an altercation even. I mean, Sydney just merely calls her out on her actions, And so, yeah, it's definitely disheartening in that moment to kind of see Theo's like, oh, you want to be woke, but you still sleep, and nobody has time to wake you up.
And there was the other moment where the man accosts him on the street, and the man is clearly distressed. He's clearly not in his right mind. And Theo kind of hands him over to the police, which isn't going to help the man at all.
And this is written in the modern time. This is not, this is 2020. We're taking place at the same time. We already understand police violence. We already understand brutality that Black people face. You do not have to be like in the situation to be aware of that. And so it's very much disappointing as well, for sure, in terms of knowing who Theo is as a character. Once again, that unreliability, not sure if but I mean, I feel like there's moments, especially towards the end with Verintech, where I feel like Theo kind of has a moment of redeeming himself, but the larger issue is Verintech itself, right?
Yes. So Verintech is kind of a business conglomerate that is responsible for, Verintech is kind of a conglomerate of businesses, one of which is the real estate company that is responsible for buying up the homes in the neighborhood. And they also now own the hospital, where we later find out they are running tests on the missing neighbors. So they are testing the drugs that they're trying to use to treat opioid addiction on the missing neighbors, which Sydney and Theo kind of discover together.
Yeah, that was really a slap in the face. First of all, you come into this historically Black neighborhood in Brooklyn, and we all know about the war on drugs and the crack epidemic and how it disproportionately affected Black people and communities. So you're gonna come in under the guise of helping. Helping who, right? I mean, the opioid addiction clearly is affecting many Americans, yes, but far and wide, typically, white flyover states are the ones who are being hit the most. And then you take people, literally Black people, to use them as human guinea pigs, human subjects to help white people get over their drug addiction. It's just so much racism. It's just racism on top of racism on top of racism. It's a lot to unpack and a lot to actually take in. But the great thing about the novel is that despite, the very complex topics that it's focusing on, it kind of creates some nice motifs throughout that helps you kind of, flow through it and not feel so stuck in the heaviness of it. Like, for instance, one of the things I really enjoyed was the sense of home that we get. Although the neighborhood is under attack, although there's a sense of urgency, we also get this beautiful moment where we understand what the neighborhood means to Sydney and specifically. It's a place for her, it's a place of refuge, even after a failed marriage, even after a not so great career. Home for her allows her to reinvent herself, allows her to kind of refocus and recenter in a way that she hasn't been able to before. There's also some kind of weird, not so fluffy, beautiful motifs that we have going on here, like the underground passageways.
Yeah,
too much.
There's a lot of usage of like the hidden and the unknown. So we see that with the hidden underground passageways that lead into the hospital that Sydney and Theo take. And then we also see them in her own home, where she uses it as an avenue to escape someone who is coming to attack her. But then she ends up discovering the body of her friend Drea. So these passageways kind of represented the hidden, unknown things that are going on in the neighborhood and that lie right beneath the surface. The infestation of bed bugs, which we mentioned a little bit earlier, also becomes a symbol. Sydney is absolutely freaked out when she has her first infestation of bed bugs. And when she goes up to Drea's apartment later on in the novel, she notices that there are bed bugs on her bed, and she kind of freaks out, cleans everything. So these bed bugs are representative of the white folks that have moved into her neighborhood and have taken it over and have infested it.
The sinister nature of the racism.
One other thing about bed bugs is, if we think about what they do, they're blood suckers. Like, they drain your blood or your life source, which is what the white folk are doing to the neighborhood as well.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty deep. There's also this weird thing happening with light, which I think is important to mention, because there's several times in the novel where there's instances of darkness that brings confusion and pandemonium, but it's also a manipulated thing. So, for instance, I'm thinking about this scene at the end of the novel in particular, where there is basically a blackout, but the blackout is targeted only in this Black neighborhood. They literally can look out and see the lights of the hospital and see the lights of other neighborhoods, but somehow their specific electrical stuff is down. There's also this weird thing they're doing with light where it's also being demonized in a different way. I think about the scene in the bodega when Sydney goes back after it's under new ownership, under new management. And it's literally sterile and bright and blinding when she walks in. And thinking about the use of light in that instance, it's don't touch this, you're not welcome here, this is not for you. We have reached our time for theory. So basically, capitalism is racist.
Yes.
Yes.
So to get us started, I'm going to read a quote from Black Marxism by Cedric J Robinson. He says, "The historical development of world capitalism was influenced in a most fundamental way by the particularistic forces of racism and nationalism." Mm-hmm. Now, in this chapter, if you're interested, he kind of breaks down how capitalism came to exist, and he correlates that directly with racism and argues that the two are inextricably linked. You cannot have capitalism without racism, and that's really reflected in this novel. We have this large corporation that is buying up everything. And we learn at the end of the novel, it is not just Sydney's neighborhood. It is happening all over the country.
I mean, if we really think about what capitalism stands for, it's basically the idea of an individual getting as much as they possibly can for as least as possible, right? And so what but anything would free labor be able to kind of build that system where Black bodies are being used to help fund the American dream that we love to talk, well, I say we loosely, but Americans love to tote as an equal opportunity thing for all Americans. And so yes, capitalism is definitely inherently racist, absolutely.
Like the current state of our country and with everything that's going on, we have to get rid of this idea that you can just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and like make the most of a situation. There's been a lot of talk about affirmative action and whether or not it's fair. And I think at this point, we have to stop thinking about fairness a little bit. The last however many 100 years of our country has not been fair. So we have to start thinking about progress and making a change.
Absolutely. Not equality, but equity. It's very much a different thought process, right? But overall, though the book, I would say, carries a lot of heavy and interesting topics, I would say that I would say go ahead and give it a read. Honestly, though, I think what's interesting about it is the fact that it's kind of pushing the limits and boundaries of genre fiction.
Ultimately, I would recommend the book. I like it. I think that if you are into a thriller, especially like a Black thriller like Get Out, this is the book for you. It's not, it is kind of a heavy read, but it's not a difficult read. She's really good with prose. Like we said, the imagery is good. It's going to keep you interested. Like we said, there are some points where you may be like, but overall, it's an enjoyable read.
And so thank you so much for watching our first video. If you'd like to see more from our specific channel, you can go ahead and follow us on our Instagram page, where we are going to be constantly uploading our schedule of readings. If you'd like to follow along, us at Melanated Theory. All links will be in the description box below.
If you are interested in the book by Cedric J Robinson, Black Marxism, we will link that in the description box below as well. Thanks for viewing. See you next time, and keep reading. That's horrible. I don't know what to say.
We're gonna keep working on that. All right, bye guys.